the lecture 26 of Basic Electrical System course. Today, in these lectures, we will going to see what are the different types of wires which are used in automotive applications. What are the different materials which is used for manufacturing these wires. So let's start today's lecture. Now, in case of automotive wiring, we are using a copper as a material for the wires. As I have earlier told you that the copper is an excellent electrical conductor as compared to other materials. Therefore, and the copper is also reasonably cost. So the best material we can say it is the silver, but silver cost is very high. Therefore, the copper whose properties are similar to just like silver in case of this electrical conductivity. So we are considering this copper for the wires in case of this automotive electrical applications. And one more peculiar property of the copper is it can be break when moved repeatedly. Okay. Now, so in case of automobiles, we have to manage this electrical wiring in a very small space. In this case, what happens? We have to bend these wires at some point, and due to this bending of the wires, there are chances of breaking of these wires. So therefore, the structure of this wire is made such that small strands of wire are prepared, and these multiple small strands are clubbed together, and from which the electrical current is passed. Now, this making of the wires into small strands and combining them allows us for repeated bending and moving without breaking. And that is why it is a common practice for using these copper wires in form of strands. Okay. Now, another important point, these copper wires are insulated with some insulating material that can be a plastic. And you know, this conductor, that is a copper, that allows electricity to pass through it, and it is due to the small strands, it is flexible and it is also affordable. Okay. Now, imagine a single copper wire, and if you bend it back and forth, it may break into few times. However, if you have a multiple thin strands of copper that is twisted together, it can bend more easily and it won't break as quickly. Okay. Now, this next important point, that is we say as AWG. This AWG stands for American wire gauge. Now, the thickness of a wire is measured in gauge, and that is American wire gauge. And it is important to know that with AWG, a higher number means a thinner wire. For instance, a 14 gauge wire is thinner as compared to 10 gauge wire. And as you know, for higher current flow, you need a thicker wire, which has a low gauge number. Take a small example. A thick 10 gauge wire might be needed to safely carry power to car's headlight, but a thin 20 gauge wire would work well for connecting small speaker wires. Okay. Now, coming on to the next point, I hope you can see this. Okay. Now, these are the general applications of a particular wire gauge for particular applications. For example, the radio speaker wires, we are using tail 20 to 22 gauge wire. Small bulbs and short leads, we are using 18 gauge. 16 gauge is used for tail lights, gas gauge, turn signals, windshield wipers. 14 gauge wire is used for horn, radio, power lead, headlights, lighter, brake lights. 12 gauge wire for the headlight switch to fuse box, rear window defogger, power windows and locks. And 10 gauge wire used for heavy application where huge amount of current is supplied. That is in case of ammeters, generators, or alternator to battery. Now, the next important point is a metric wire gauge. So in India or in some countries, this metric wire gauge is terminology is used. Now, all these manufacturers measure the diameter of the wire and it is mentioned in terms of square, or we can say the area or the cross-sectional area. Now, this chart gives the conversion between this metric and AWG gauge wires. Okay. Now, you can see if the metric size, that is the cross-sectional diameter, is 0.5 square, the AWG size is 20. And if you see the cross-sectional area is 52, then I think this size is around 0. Okay, if 0 gauge AWG gauge is there, so we can say it is a 52 square cross-sectional area size of the or diameter of this, or we can say cross-sectional of this wire. Now coming to the next important point, it is a very important point. What happens, I can say that, as you know, if we increase the length of the conductor, okay, what is going to happen? Means if we are going to increase the length and diameter of the conductor, there are some changes in the resistance of the wire. Okay, so therefore, if the resistance of the wire increases, then there are the energy losses. The energy is lost in the transmission of these electrons. So the longer a wire runs, the thicker it needs to reduce the energy loss. Okay, if a wire is too thin, it could overheat. For example, a trailer light might need a 14 gauge wire, but if it is over 20 feet long, switching to a 12 gauge wire is a safer. If the length of the wire increases, we have to, in order to reduce the energy losses, we have to increase the diameter of the wire. For example, if you run 20-foot wire to the back of a trailer, it is safer to go in thickness from 14 gauge to 12 gauge wire to ensure that wire does not heat or lose power. Coming on to the next point. Okay. Now, see, as you have seen in the chart, the American gauge, AWG gauge, they are specified with certain numbers, 12 gauge, 13, 12 gauge, 14 gauge. But these numbers are in a discrete manner. Suppose there is a 12 gauge and 14 gauge. So in between 12 and 14, there is a 13 gauge. So if I want a 13 gauge wire for a particular application, would I get it? Yes, you can get it. But this wire is not readily available in the market because these wires are prepared according to the standard dimensions, and these standard dimension wires are available in the market. You can get a 13 gauge wire from the manufacturer, but it will take a more time because he has to manufacture and he has to give it to you. So here we can see we can say there for a particular number of American gauge, what is the diameter of the wire in the inches. So here we can get, so if you see 12 and 13, you can see there is not very much difference in the diameter of the wire. So the diameter of 13 gauge wire, okay, if we are using 12 gauge wire, that will serve the purpose. There will be no any proper, or we can say there will be no any hurdles in the operation of the equipment. Okay, so I hope today you have understood the concept of American wire gauge. Any student, if has any problem, you can drop me a mail regarding this. Okay, so these are the very important concepts that every electrical technician should know what kind of wire they are using for what kind of applications. So what are the characteristics of the wire, that diameter of the wire, its gauge, and also the material which is used for the wires. In some cases, nowadays aluminum is also used in case of these wires, but aluminum electrical conductivity is not good as that of a copper, and also the electrical resistance is more in case of this aluminum. So if we are using the aluminum, it is a cost effective way. The cost of aluminum is less as compared to the copper, but we are facing the problems with the operations, such as the energy losses are more in case of the aluminum. So it is better to go for a copper wires. It initially it will cost you more, but the running and operating cost of the systems which are involved will be less in case of this copper. So thank you for today.